What's up, guys, and welcome back for another solo mining episode. This is gonna be episode 20. I'll be showing you kind of the setup I use with the Rorqual and the Hulks in this one. So normally when I get to this level, when I'm using Hulks and a Rorqual and nullsec, I'm usually just ice mining for the most part. Now, the strategy I'm going to be showing you in this video is going to be drag mining. So essentially what's going to be happening is we're going to warp to the ice belt, and we're going to be constantly aligning to our safe bookmark while the hulks are following in behind me and mining as we go. Now, either the Rorqual and the hulks will fill up with ice and will warp away, or we'll run out of range of anything that the hulks can reach and will warp away, or if a neutral comes in during the drag, we'll warp away. Some key concepts for this, and the fit that I have in the description is primarily used for this type of mining. The expanded cargo holds that I have in the lows, the purpose behind those is to bring my overall sub warp speed as low as possible. You can use a Higgs anchor rig to do the same thing, but I prefer to run the bulkhead rigs. I just prefer to have more EHP for the Rorqual. Plus, it allows me to actually more easily change this into a drone or siege mining sort of setup. And with that being said, if you're wanting to actually take the Rorqual out to grid and siege up and use excavators, the fit that you would use is drastically different. Now, what I did and what you should do is use like a shuttle or something and go out to the ice belt and find a good bookmark on the back side of the ice belt. And the way this works is basically our drag start bookmark and our safe bookmark, the line that is between those two bookmarks intersects the ice belt, which you will see here. Now, we're already near our safe bookmark and we're moving. As you can see, my maximum movement speed is 44.2, and that's low enough that because the slower we go with the Rorqual, the more time we have on grid to mine. So we're going to go ahead and get started here. I am going to go ahead and warp the fleet to my drag start nav. And since the Rorqual is already moving at top speed at 44, then it'll go ahead and warp out, which I do want the Rorqual to actually hit grid first, and then these hulks will actually be going parallel with each other. They'll be hitting grid at the same time. This is going to be your most vulnerable time right here, is going to be during your warp to your drag start, because if any neutral comes into system while you're in this transition period, if they know you're going to the ice belt, then they could meet you there. So if something does happen, if something comes up in an intel or something comes up in adjacent systems, or even worse, if a neutral comes into system, once you get here, you're going to want to go immediately back to your safe nav. So to help illustrate this a little bit more, it might be a little bit hard to see because of the star, but here is our drag start bookmark. And then as you can see way out there, that is our safe nav. And then the ice belt is directly between them. Once you get to grid here, the first thing you want to do is you want to align the Rorqual to your safe nav, and it'll start turning around and moving. We're going to go over to our hulks here. I'm going to open up Fleet Hangar, and then I'm just going to approach them. And we want them to actually just be following the Rorqual. And then we're going to go ahead and get some targets up for each alt as well. We're going to be selecting near targets. The fit for these guys are in the description as well. We're using the ore ice harvesters because they're a lot better on CPU and range, which range is king with this kind of setup. And the next thing we're going to be looking forward to is we're going to be looking for rats, because usually rats are going to spawn shortly after you actually get to grid. Next thing we want to do on the Rorqual, since now we're pretty much aligned, we're going to go and turn on our burst. Once I actually get all these guys kind of set up, we'll kind of talk a little bit more about the fit. So now these guys have a 36 kilometer range on their miners. I'm gonna go ahead and grab Faction Ice. I just like Faction Ice better, and I'm gonna try to get the Hulks on kind of the same rock if I can, because it allows me to just kind of like kill rocks as I kind of go. Now, you want to make sure that your alignment path doesn't intersect with any rocks. I'm going to go ahead and throw drones out. I don't really micromanage the Hulk's drones. I just kind of worry about the rats from the Rorqual's perspective. If the rats attack the Hulks, then the drones will kick into action. But essentially, we've got heavies that are going to be taking down the battleships first. We'll go ahead and grab targets for the other guys as well. And we're still mining here too, so just keep in mind that they might drop your target, which is unfortunate for Garista space, but just kind of how it goes. We want to just make sure that we kind of keep the Hulk's mining hold clear so that we don't have to worry too much about reassigning targets or anything. I'm gonna let these heavies actually take down this battleship, and then I'm probably gonna switch over to Hornets and get these frigates down. But really, we're already kind of just doing what we normally do. I normally just let the Hulks fill up the fleet hangar before I move anything into the Rorqual's bay. I don't know if these heavies are actually going to do a whole lot against these. I'll switch them out if they... Okay, they're taking them down. That's another kind of vulnerable position that you are in as well, is while you're kind of fighting rats, you're also trying to make sure like you're keeping your ore hold clear, and a lot of stuff going on. But normally once you come to grid and you've gotten the initial rat spawn cleared out, then it'll get pretty chill as we go. Let's go ahead and I'm gonna move those guys over. Also, I guess while we're just kind of like sitting here chilling and we're during the drag, I do have a siege module on this fit and the ice compressor, but it's not used for compressing ice while we're mining. Normally what I'll do is, if I'm using a POS or a safe nav like here, once I fill up and I actually go to my safe nav or to a POS, I will siege up there and compress. And the added benefit of using expanding cargo holds to lower our speed means that we get a bigger cargo hold as well. So you could technically just kind of throw compressed ore in there. But generally speaking, you'd probably hit a Athnor or a Tatara if you wanted to dock to kind of empty out as you're going. I like this setup because this allows me to get a considerable amount of ice for a very short amount of time. Alright, looks like all of our rats are dead, so we're going to go ahead and pull all the drones in. We want to make sure we keep all the drones. I don't like leaving drones out in space while we're just kind of mining here. Heavies will... come on, heavies. Get back in. Here they go. These rocks, these ice rocks out here are usually 200 or so, 200 to 300 units. So in most cases, you might hang out on one single rock for the entire drag. And as you can see, we've got a ways to go before we're actually out of range too. So we could have actually put our bookmark way out here, our start bookmark, which would have given us more time on this rock. But we really won't be out of range until we get somewhere out here. So our targets along our path, we're going for faction ice, would be like this one, probably this one, and then probably the last one being this one or that one right there. But getting good at setting up good drag bookmarks is extremely important. The burst we're using is generally the same that we use for the Orca or the Porpoise. So the only mining burst I don't use is the preservation charge, since we're not using crystals, and then extension charge for the shields. This strategy is actually extremely scalable as well. We've in the past have done this with friends where we've had single Rorqual with like 7 hulks following. If you have somebody out here with you doing it, you can actually do something even more interesting, where you assign like a lead hulk, and so essentially every other hulk other than the lead would just basically follow or approach the lead hulk, and then the lead hulk could actually come out here in alongside the Rorqual and basically match its speed. So it'd be moving the same speed as the Rorqual, and then when you're ready to actually warp off, you would just have the lead hulk go full speed. Since we're not using Higgs anchors on any of the hulks, and those guys would just take off. They'd get up to full speed, and then once you actually warp the fleet, everybody'd go at the same time. Generally speaking, I like this setup because it's a little bit quicker, just kind of get off the ground, and the hulks will warp off very soon after the Rorqual. But really, the most important part of this whole equation, as far as keeping safe, would be the Rorqual. So at all times right now, the Rorqual is ready to immediately leave grid. Keep in mind though, if you're boosting, if you are trying to use a bookmark like above a Tatara or something to warp to dock up the Rorqual if something happens, if you're using boost, you will have a weapons timer, so keep in mind that you won't be able to dock immediately, especially if it's not that far away. That's why I usually recommend using a player controlled starbase or a POS, because you can get into the POS, you can let your weapons timer die off, and usually the threat will dissipate, and then once the weapons timer is down, then you can warp to a Tatara or Forzar and dock up that way. But what's nice here is we do have 36-kilometer range on both these guys, and this rock is still only at 15. So we can, the amount of time we've already spent on this rock, we can, double that and still be on it. So we might only have to change targets once during this entire process. And this is where we started, and this is where we are. So it ends up working out pretty well. Now, another thing I'll note too is once you actually do several runs at this and you're targeting this rock, or you start clearing some of the stuff in closer range, it is helpful to actually kind of move, continually move your drag start up as you're starting to clear things in the belt. So since we actually started this bookmark pretty close, we might not have to do that until we're kind of targeting this stuff here. At that point, we might actually move it up here. And the way you can do that is you just warp to your start nav as normal. You start your alignment, you start your whole mining process as normal. And then as you start moving closer, you'll just open up your locations and drop a custom location to move it. Remove the other one, rename it if you want. That's generally how we've done it in the past. All right, let's go and talk about cycle time. So the hulks right now are getting about 1 piece of ice every 27 seconds. So we're getting basically 4 ice per minute, which is pretty decent. Obviously, if you were sieging up, then it'd be a lot better, but there's really no point in doing it. If you want to have sustainable income in nullsec through making fuel blocks or doing any sort of like manufacturing, your industrial side, the way you actually get your moon ore or the way you get your ice, needs to be sustainable and as risk-free as you can make it. So that's why I tend to use drag mining when I'm doing any sort of like moon mining or ice mining, because it allows me to have a lot of control in securing or making sure my assets are safe. We've already done 104, actually about 108 units, 106, 110 units of ice so far, and it's just kind of, at this point, just business as usual. This kind of setup tends to be a lot better with more alts. 2 hulks are just fine. Don't think that I'm just trying to, like, sell you on having multiple alts, because the more alts you have, it's the more things you have to worry about. 2 is just fine. It's usually what I run is 2 miners and a command ship. But if you really want to, like, do some crazy income as far as industry or whatever, having it's just amazing to see 8 or even 7 hulks behind a Rorqual doing this. The amount that you can mine. We've mined entire ice belts, in a few hours doing that kind of thing, which is extremely pleasing. And the fact that we can do that, and also if anything happens in local, we can immediately pull our guys off grid, is very nice to nice to do, because it gives you the ability to go out and feel confident about getting that high yield and everything. The reason I picked this corner of the ice belt is because it makes our start nav as far away from 0 as possible. You could technically shift this laterally over here and kind of move along the outside to maintain as much distance as possible, because if anybody does come to the ice for you, they're going to pop here. But even if we see them coming local, then we're just going to warp off. So by the time they actually get to 0, we'll be gone. But it's just kind of best practice to stay away from, or stay as far away from 0 as possible. All right, we are at 25k from this rock. We've got about 10k before to go. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to remove all the targets except the one we're mining, and I'm going to go ahead and kind of set up our next target. We're going to pass right by this one, so we're going to grab that one for both hulks. And to detarget these like that, you just hold down Control and Shift and then click the actual target, and then Control click the other one. And then I'm going to go ahead and actually select that, so if we drop, then we can immediately just hit F1 and F2 and get back on it. This also just allows us to, kind of organize our process. You see we're moving straight over, still moving straight to our target there. I usually try to empty the hulks when they have about 8 units, even though they can hold technically 11. We've done about 136 units of ice so far. At this rate, I know that I'll probably, with how my drag is going, I'm probably going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of about 300 units of pristine white glaze. So using that information, you can go to ePraisal and throw up around 300 pristine white glaze and see kind of what that is. Obviously the value is going to change when you compress it and things, but really this is set up, this type of mining is really to support industry and manufacturing and things like that. If you can technically take this ice and you could sell it, you could reprocess it and sell the isotopes, which will move really, really well because of jump fuel and things like that. But for the most part, I mean, I guess to put it into perspective, whenever I was doing this daily and making fuel blocks, I was making probably about 6 to 8 billion from fuel block sales a week. And I was going out and drag mining, I don't know, probably 3 or 4 times a day to help support the PI that was coming in towards that. It might give you some idea. About 156 units right now. Make sure we check. We got about 34k. So we're not going to get that cycle complete. So we're going to go ahead and switch over. This will probably be our last target. 34 on that one. Go and cancel that one. Move it over to this new rock. But I'm hoping that this video was enlightening, informative, at least maybe entertaining. This isn't an extremely popular way to mine. A lot of people will just kind of warp to grid. Even if they're not sieging, they'll just kind of hang out and not move. I prefer to just always have the out or I always have like the escape route for the Rorqual. You can even kind of go one step further if you have a Sino Vault in another system. If for some reason you can't escape when you're dragging, which would be highly unlikely if you're paying attention, then you do have the option of being able to Sino out the Rorqual as well. But really, this entire setup is kind of designed to keep you from having to use the Sino Vault or whatever. I would say some of the requirements for this would be at least minimally a pause. That allows you to not have to run into any weird docking weapon timer issues if you have to get off grid. Alright, we're at about 172 units here. This will be 100% our last rock that will probably hit, even though technically when we get out to like max range for the ice harvesters, we could probably still take this one. But at that point, I think we're going to be full because we're 172,000 cubic meter of 300. So we're going to be filled up here in a short time. All right, I'm just emptying, moving everybody. About 180 now. So 120 more units. And the other thing too is like if you can, if you're not being accosted by locals or rats or whatever, and you're able to stay in range of stuff, a perfect run would essentially look like the Rorqual mining hold completely full, the fleet hangar completely full, and the hulks completely full. That's usually kind of how I, if I'm going to be able to do a full run, I'd like to do that. And then even a step beyond that, filling up the cargo hold for the Rorqual as well with raw ice. At that point, you're looking at, you could be close to 400 units in a single trip. All right, another 8 units on the pile. 188. Kind of look at our positioning here. You can see here, we've already come quite a far. We've moved 58 kilometers from where we started since this video, since we kicked off the mining. Not too bad. And just letting you guys know, if I was actually going to recommend ice mining with a Rorqual and hulks, this is exactly the setup that I'd recommend because it's the most sustainable. Obviously, with sieging and stuff like that, you could make cycle times even lower and get even more. But I feel like this is probably the best setup as far as keeping your assets alive, which is important. We want to make sure we get our money's worth, our ISK worth, out of the ships that we use. 196 units. Moving quite along. So like I said, yeah, what are we at? We're still at 8,300 meters. So we're going to definitely be over 300 units when we're done. But I figured I'd kind of use this opportunity in this video to kind of go over the Rorqual, the drag mining idea, and some ice mining with the hulks. Hopefully you enjoyed it. And as far as like value per hour, I mean, you can just kind of look at the whenever you sim it, whenever you like sim your miners and their hulks, look at their boosted cycle speed and just kind of use those numbers to extrapolate and figure out what your ISK per hour would be, because it's going to change based on a lot of different variables. But I'd say, if you're doing everything correctly, you're probably looking at about 300 units per run. Now, depending on how long a run takes you, it just kind of depends. But really, in terms of like this kind of mining, I don't really look at it in like terms of ISK per hour. I tend to value it as units per run, because the least amount of runs you can do a day to fulfill your industry need, the better. And also there's been cases where I just, kind of farm faction ice when I'm not really using it. But yeah, you want to be somewhere, north of 300 units, and you'd be doing pretty good. Ice is kind of taking a hit these days, so value might not be very appealing. But if you're building fuel blocks, if you're building anything that requires ice product, this is this is the way to go. But anyway, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.